Hey guys, I'm Dani Castellano, and this is Diet Culture. Nick is with me today, and we are talking about social determinants of health, economics, how diet culture really unjustly plays on the individual being responsible for their health, and why there's really a lot more going on to it than what we are told every day.
Yeah, chime in if you want to hear me struggle with the word economist over and over.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I'm going to start us off today with reading a little bit of an article I came across that is entitled The Capitalist Machine, aka Diet Culture. Very on brand with what we're going to discuss today. And I will put the link into the show notes of this episode. But basically, this article is talking about all the messages we see in a day promoting diets, weight loss, clean eating, etc. And it goes in to say there's one powerful motivator that fuels all of the messaging that surrounds diet culture and weight stigma, and that is money. Capitalism is a system of economy and government in which trade and industry operate for profit. For profit. That is what sets capitalism apart from other systems. It is for profit. We live in a capitalist society, which means that the underlying motive for the vast majority of business ventures is the bottom line, making money, and more importantly, making a profit. That means that all marketing is designed to convince you that you should spend your money on something. One of the most alluring ways that businesses pull you into their marketing schemes is by creating stories or pictures that cause you to feel bad about yourself, feeding into your inner critic, or what I have come to call my monster. These advertisements communicate to you, the consumer, that there is something wrong with you, that you are flawed or needing fixing of some variety. The message is that whatever the problem is, only this product or diet or exercise class or nutrition bar or book will solve or cure. So, next time before you get out your wallet and fork over your hard earned cash, think about what this product or diet or cleanser lifestyle change is supporting, how it impacts society, and ultimately whether it is backing you up in your journey to recovery, self acceptance, and a greater sense of worthiness or belonging, or is it getting in the way? So I didn't read the entire article. I'd really encourage you to peek at it. It's really well written by Corey Van Horn from a nutrition and counseling website. And yeah, I
Cool.
think it's a helpful reminder, as I'm not the most economically inclined individual to even read like what the definition of capitalism is and why this has anything to do with diet culture. So I was curious if you had anything you wanted to expand on in just that brief synopsis of why that is related
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the topic of this.
Awesome. So I just wanted to chime in first and foremost with that, this isn't like, this isn't necessarily what we're doing today, like a direct attack on capitalism per se, right? Because this is a big trigger word. So I just want to
Sure.
chime in on this for a sec.
Yes.
We're not necessarily gonna cutthroat capitalism. We're not necessarily gonna attack capitalism as much as just like attacking this like our economy right now has flaws, right? So
Mhm.
I just wanted to acknowledge real quickly for all the people that are mad already is that any system could have the flaws that our system currently has, which in my opinion is tremendous wealth gaps and poor people at all. Is a problem in my eyes, and it's unjust, and we'll get into that. But that's what I'm attacking today, right? Like we're not economists. I don't even know, you know what I'm saying?
Economists?
Economists. So like I'm not necessarily attacking that per se, um, even though I'm will do that sometimes, and obviously I'm not the hugest fan all the time, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, and I think the reason that that's even part of the conversation about the money that is made off of the weight loss industry and diet culture in general is because when the bottom line is what is the motivator. And I'm not saying that no one cares about their product, because I think that is unfair to say that people with these companies don't ever believe in what they're doing is a helpful thing and that it's worth the money that they're making. But it's just a really good call out on, like, why is this so expensive? Is it actually something that's helpful? Who is benefiting from this? Is it truly myself or is it the company? And I think that's just always a good reminder, because we can really get caught up in that hype, and marketing is so clever and it's probably only going to get more clever. And I don't think anyone listening is stupid or isn't able to decipher any of that on their own. But I think even myself, with having almost 30 years on this planet and all the knowledge that I do about diet culture, I still get, like, something pokes me and makes me wonder about things every now and then, because marketing can be so, so good. So
Rob Lowe was the most recent to tell me to eat some Weight Watchers salty caramel treats, and that
no,
is
that's Atkins.
okay. Might be there, but Rob Lowe, who is like that's a good one. I mean, like a lot of people know him from his
Mhm,
controversy from the '80s. I think maybe '90s, maybe two, whatever. But that he, most people know him from Parks and Rec, from being like the sweetheart,
mhm.
peppy, loving, I don't know, like father figure ish dude. So stuff like that can really go a long way in
Yeah,
convincing. Yeah, and I don't think
and
you're stupid if you fall victim. I'll use that term, but like honestly, it's not even like you really have to like be hyper aware to not fall victim to all of
mhm,
those things around you, because the messaging is incredible, as we're 6 episodes deep into this talking about that messaging.
mhm.
Yeah.
Speaking of Weight Watchers, because I always like to talk about Weight Watchers, James Corden is the most recent representative that I've seen for Weight Watchers. That commercial came on the other day when I was watching Hulu.
Yeah,
And he's also a super likable and lovely human being, and so when you see someone that you relate to their character in any way, I think that's a big reason why celebrities endorsing products is so helpful to the company, because it really draws people in.
yeah, no, yeah, and that's yeah, it's problematic, on a several I mean, like, to if y I guess there's instances in which, like, celebrity advertising isn't problematic, but, like, most of the times you're like, "Are you
Mhm,
actually doing this?" Obviously, this transcends diet culture, this
mhm,
concept, but,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, so a fun fact, I don't know if you've ever heard this number, Nick, but the weight loss industry is estimated to be worth approximately $70 billion.
It's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. Something that really strikes a chord with me is that when we do fall victim to diet culture, which I think everyone does at some capacity, and we're trying all these different programs and diets and products, you're wasting your money oftentimes, because we know that diets have a 95+% failure rate. So if we knew the thing that was going to help people lose weight and keep it off, there wouldn't be this $70 billion industry, right? So you're spending money on these products and then coming out with the end result of personal failure, and further stigmatization, especially for people existing in larger bodies. And then, like, what do you have to show for that?
So that's a brilliant point that I'd just like to hammer home real quick, is that you said it's, right, they advertise that it is your weight to lose, but when you don't lose the weight, there's so many loopholes that it is your fault for not having lost that
Mhm.
weight or for having gained it back, what have you. So any system like that, any dichotomous system like that, where they are helping you, but if you fail, it is not their fault.
Mhm.
Always. Obviously, I think those are obviously, like, the worst, systems, but, I just wanted to emphasize that they are literally never at fault unless they, like, literally harm your body and you sue them in a class action.
Mhm.
They're not at fault. So great point there. Obviously, just be so wary of that.
Yeah. Um, I wanna point out some of the ways that, diet culture is promoting spending so much money, for quote unquote health, um, because it's not all just diet programs, but the consumption of organic and fresh produce is most people, if you were to ask them, and this is just me spitballing from my time as an outpatient dietitian, but like, I need to eat fresh produce over canned or frozen is a common myth. Um, and the need to eat organic food. And I do want to say also that I'm certainly not shaming anyone who does have um, a comfortable amount of money and they choose to spend it on these things. That's not the point of this.
Yeah, I would quickly like to say that I that's my goal, right? That's what I want. I want everybody to be able to have the disposable income to walk into a Whole
Yeah.
Foods and buy their entire whatever. So that's what I am advocating for, right? So I'm not shaming people who can. I'm saying I want everybody to be able to do it.
And by the end of this episode, I think you will gather that that is our thesis. But I just like to stop periodically as I'm talking for those who don't know me super well yet. That is not ever my goal. Is to emphasize more shame than we already have in our society.
Yeah, and when I
Um,
say that's the goal too, I am not shaming people, if they, like, had the means and they didn't wanna shop at Whole Foods, right? So, like, this is
yeah.
yes, very yeah.
Um, okay, so consumption of organic, fresh produce, and then there's also a push for altogether consuming these plant-based products that are replacements for dairy and meat, that can cost significantly more depending on the item. I know there's always gonna be caveats about why and where things are gonna cost more, but it's just the push for these products in particular, and I used to be the dietitian that had a list of these fancy products because I thought that's what people wanted, and gave them out and encouraged it, so I totally get it from both sides. Um, and then there's the expensive and fancy, like, powders and proteins and vitamins used as meal enhancers or nutrition replacements or honestly, like, certain products that are used without genuine evidence that they do anything for you, but because they're trendy and we hop on those trends. And I'm certainly not in the camp that just because there isn't scientific evidence that backs up that this, let's say, like ashwagandha, for example, which has been linked to helping with anxiety, that people don't notice a benefit from it even if it's not proven that at a certain amount it's not gonna be beneficial or is beneficial. I just always wanna kind of point that out because having a science-based background, it's important to me to just look at the facts behind things, especially when we're dropping so much money, on stuff and we know the placebo effect, which is where you're convinced something's gonna work, so um it changes the outcome because you think it's going to. We know that that's real too. Um, there's the push to have meal prep being done, and with the time constraints that many, many, many people have, there's a lot of outside companies that do that, and it's expensive. Um, and meal delivery kits and services that offer these quote unquote healthy foods to come right to your door. Um, and those I'm probably not even I'm just touching on the food aspects. I'm not even getting into the exercise, piece of it, but that's just there's just so much that's being pushed and encouraged, um, that's above basic needs for health, and I think it's wonderful for us to evolve and to incorporate more things as we learn that they can be beneficial, but the problem here is that baseline access to food is not something that everyone has, so it really freaking sucks when we start adding this push to have all these extra, extra, extra things, and then we have a population who feels like they're not healthy because they're eating some canned fruits and vegetables, and there's nothing wrong with eating canned fruits and vegetables. So it really just creates separation and further oppression when we're being told this is your personal responsibility. Ooh, but if you don't have access to all of these things, you're never gonna be healthy enough, lose the weight, XYZ. All these messages that we're being told are really tied to morality a lot of the time.
So yes, so this is right. It's two issues. So this is on one end, it's lack of access, and then on
Mhm.
the other end of the spectrum, it's the like dangling of uh, something that people don't have in order to get them to spend frivolously.
Mhm.
So
In order to be good enough and to what we're told is to live a fulfilling life. And that's to the thing that's being dangled. I certainly everyone needs access and deserves access to these things in order to be well. That is understood.
yeah, and we're really just talking about like access in the United States, I think,
Yeah.
right? Like we're not even getting into extreme lack of access, which is a very real problem all
Yeah.
all around the world, and even somewhere in places in the United States. So, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Um, so when we talk about this stigma and oppression, especially of people in larger bodies or people without as much money and health conditions, and blaming them for existing the way that they are, I had talked about this briefly in our first episode, but the social determinants of health. And I just wanted to take a moment to define that a little bit further. It's defined on health.gov. The CDC lists the definition and then it links you if you click on it to this health.gov website, and I can include that in the show notes. But basically, the social determinants of health have a major impact on people's health, well being, and quality of life. So, this includes safe housing, transportation and neighborhoods, racism, discrimination, and violence, education, job opportunities and income, access to nutritious foods and physical activity opportunities, polluted air and water, and language and literacy skills. So that's a whole lot to unpack. And the reason that I bring this up in context of a podcast on diet culture is that we blame people's health on two things oftentimes: their ability to eat nutritious foods, which often a common perception of someone in a larger body from a healthcare professional is that they are lazy, that they're not making healthy food choices, and that it's like a thing being that they are doing to themselves that is really just super uneducated and fat phobic. But those 2 factors are associated so much with our health, and that's really, like, all we talk about when we have these other things that impact people's well-being and quality of life that we're not considering in this conversation of, "Oh, if you wanna be healthy, get 8 hours of sleep, meditate, make sure you eat 17 servings of fruits and vegetables a week and get on that treadmill for 45 minutes a day. And I'm just making up arbitrary things with those last two, but you hear some pretty extreme advice and it's just not accurate, um, because our health encompasses so much more and that's what we focus on. Probably a main reason behind that being that those are places that are really easy to make money off of if we narrow it down, and some of these much larger issues, systemically are being ignored. And I don't, I'm gonna correct myself there. I do not think that not having access to food is, not it's not a large issue.
Yeah, and I would like to, yeah, so again, that thing, and I talked about this in our first episode, but we constantly blame people for their situations as if they were direct consequences of their actions, and it just so rarely is that way, and it's really frustrating for me. I don't think any of our listeners are anything less than Jeff Bezos as people, but clearly, what we have around us would say that you are vastly, vastly less than that person who doesn't have to have all these things dangled over their heads.
Yeah. So to kind of get you talking a little bit more about this, because I know you have a lot to say. Why do you care about this?
Um, you want me to get personal with it, like, and use?
You can, because I think that that's a relevant thing to bring to the conversation. I mean, it certainly, in my experience, it is important to me.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things here as I'm looking at the way to approach this. So I'm gonna just try to do it as cohesively as possible. But the main thing to say is that all these things are intertwined that I'm gonna talk about, right? So I'm gonna get into like diet, like in terms of like what I ate, and then like what I made, and then like things like how I viewed my body, and they're all sort of like interconnected in a sense. But anyway, so yeah, like uh I had the I like when I was younger, I was like I thought that I was chubby and I had problems with my self-image, right? Because of all of this.
Mhm.
I'm not alone on this podcast. So but and then like I was also my mom, my single mother was busting her butt to try and like put stuff on the table, and a lot of the times I was not shopping at Whole Foods. So that's what I was eating. And then when I went to college, it got way worse because you wrote on here, you're gonna talk about something with your spending and on
Mhm.
your food. But yeah, I remember one semester, I had $300 for the whole semester. And that was my everything. So somehow I ate off of $300, and a lot of that was like mooching meals off of other people. But that shouldn't be enough. Is the case in point is that 300 for 6 months, it isn't enough, and I know that a lot of people have to do that, and I'm saying that's trash, and it shouldn't
Yeah.
be that way because it's not enough. I like I would do weird like Cliff Bar binges. I think I ate only Cliff Bars for a week, which like got me by, but like I don't know, I could have been doing better. Like it wasn't helpful for me. It didn't feel good, blah blah blah. But it was worth it in my mind because I had body image issues. So like the the starving myself worked with the like like the poverty that I was in. And basically this all means like a lot to me because I've been there. I've been making nothing, and then I've been making like I've made the zero for a semester. I've made 20 a year. I've made 60 a year, and that was way easier. And it's not, I don't want to hear it. Like, it's 60, I had no problems. I could eat whatever I wanted, no one could hold it over my head, everything was fine. And I just think, and it's like it's really upsetting because it wasn't the case at any point in my life. until the moment that I got employed and in a super privileged position, and that's everything like worked out, and it took so long for that to happen, and it's so upsetting because I know how privileged I am. I know how lucky I am to be making just barely what I think is at or above the national average for a single man in the United States. Um, I hope you're googling that
I
number,
am.
but um, so and that's what is just really upsetting because my mom didn't make 60 at the time, and then she can eat what she chooses, and then she's got this whole stigma held over her head, and I've got so many pals that are my age that are younger than me who can't do the same thing, and this is literally, and this isn't even touching on the entire communities of people that have been shoved and pigeonholed into corners that can't get the access to the food because they can't get access to jobs because they can't get access to blah blah blah. Like I don't know, but it's infuriating because it's it literally it only comes down to that for me personally, and I just wish that could be fixed so that everybody could have the choice to meals, right? We do all this talk about like we have the right to all of this stuff, and that we're like a super thriving nation or world, but it's like it, food is just so understated um in all of these conversations, and I'm losing my train of thought here, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can chime in with the average is somewhere around mid 50K for a
Okay.
male in America.
So, and I don't have actual figures here, but I'm gonna go ahead and say, like, for a single person, what I would say is like they would need to make like 40. They would need to make like 32 to shop at Walmart. They would need to make like 48 to shop at Giant. You would need to make like 65 to shop at Whole Foods. And this is literally like that's just my from my budgetary things and what I buy, that's what I would need to shop at each place, right?
Mhm.
And that's how it is. Like there's that I don't know why that's so taboo to talk about because it literally is happening everywhere right around us. And even like people mentioning their salaries and stuff is super taboo. Like I didn't want to say it on this podcast. But like I don't know. It's just
I think
it's
that's a stupid stigma.
I think so too. Especially because it's so I can see it. I can see it when you walk out of your house.
Yeah.
I can think of a number and I'm not going to be far off. And
Yeah.
so like and that's so upsetting.
Yeah. So, I had a very different experience, going into college because I think growing up without a lot of money, I mean, we were always provided for, um, at some capacity, but our single mother did struggle, a lot financially, because it's hard to raise 2 kids and, certainly because I know, our parents listen, this is not a knock at either of you, by any,
Yeah,
stretch of
this
the
isn't us
imagination.
sympathizing with y'all.
Yeah, it's like the opposite, but I think because I was so like, I don't want this for the rest of my life because just watching, um there was this one time I remember I was probably in high school, um, and we went to Food Lion, Nick, and I remember mom had given me a $20 bill, and we had to get, like, groceries for, like, at least half of the week, and I remember being really, like, confused and angry about it because I was starting to learn at that time a little bit more about nutrition, and I just didn't understand how like, that's hard, for a growing boy and 2 women to eat off of that for several days. Like, that's not easy, and it's not the most, like, satisfying thing, and certainly, I may sound ungrateful for that, but as an experience as a child, um, it just felt wrong. Like, I don't want this for, my future, which I think makes sense. So, when I got to college, I worked part-time the whole entire time I was in college, and it gave me this, like, false sense of what I had and could do for myself, and I was so desperate to not continue living with the budget constraints, especially because the people you meet in college, sure, there are a lot of people experiencing poverty, and there's also a lot of people that have no clue what it's like to struggle with money, and it's really appealing, and that really got the best of me, and I was not being smart about my finances and have it's caused some problems with debt for me throughout my 20s for sure, but I remember, um, my junior year, I think, maybe senior year of college, I decided I was gonna do this clean eating plan. It was literally called that, and I went and spent $100 on groceries for myself for 1 week, and 6, 7 years later, I'm like, "What the fuck were you thinking?" But it's because I bought into this idea that in order to be good enough, I needed to, 1, lose weight, I needed to, 2, look like I had money, like people I was surrounding myself with completely unintentionally. I never have saw a relationship with a human being based on the money they could provide in any way. I don't want anyone to
Well, and if you
think
did in
that.
our society, I don't think you would be an insane person for doing that. You know
Probably
what I'm saying?
not, but that is something
Sorry,
that
continue.
resonates with me that I do want to disclose. But I think it's just really interesting having the same childhood at a certain extent, experienced differently, but the same childhood, and then going about it very different ways as adults and kinda how that shaped what these things meant to us. Um, and it's really frustrating, um, to me, especially, like, the dieting thing, that's what I thought was gonna be helpful to me in any capacity was spending that much money. Of course, I'm a nutrition major trying to become a dietitian, so I think it was in the cards for that to happen just because I think a lot of us in that field fall susceptible to things and that pressure, but it's not just in dietitians that are susceptible, it's we're pressured, into this, and it's when you're a child, which I know we say 18, you're, like, legal and can do whatever and 21, but, like, our brains are young and developing, and we're trying to figure things out for a long time. So, I think of college kids as children still. That's in my mind, I feel like I was a child at the time.
Yeah,
Um,
likewise.
so, yeah.
And I'd like to chime in on a few more things, right? I want to chime in on the talk a lot about the systems and we talk about the things going on around us. So I did free lunch for a period in high school. I don't know if you I don't you packed lunches, which, so
Yeah.
like which, definitely there's a meme in there, right? A lot of people be like a common thing would be like, "Oh, if you could pack a lunch, why are you using our free lunch?
Yeah.
Taxpayer hard earned." For you could have had the yeah, anyways, that was sarcasm by me because I needed that free lunch at the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what I'm saying is I was on free lunch also got me free breakfast. It didn't get me, like, enough helpings. All my friends would get, like, double lunches, and I couldn't do that, because I didn't have the means, and I wanted to be eating that much. I felt hungry, like I wanted to be eating that much, but I couldn't because I was on free lunch. So that's like issue. Like that's an issue. I went to college. I was very the middle class gets shafted when it comes to college student loans. I was qualified as being low class enough to get some loans, which were very helpful. Sorry, not loans. Everybody can get loans, grants, which were really helpful. They did not cover all my costs. They covered some of my costs, and they certainly gaslit me in a way where they gave me grants and loans to cover my meal plan in freshman year, which is you have to get one
Yeah.
going to a university, which meal plans are fantastic, to be honest. Like, I was I've never been, like, healthier, in in terms of my relationship with food. I don't think I've
Mhm.
ever been healthier than freshman year because I had the
You
access
had the
to the
most
food,
access.
the most access, and no one, even though it wasn't always like Ruth's Chris or whatever, I had the access to
Mhm.
food. And if I had a gluten allergy, I would have had the access to the food. And if I was a vegetarian, I would have had access to food. Um, so it was there. But then like your next year, like that's my grants don't cover that. You go off campus, they don't cover that even harder. So you lose all of that money that's helping you pay for food, which is actually honestly might be a place that we never will, but we could consider starting there with the money because food is like extremely important. I would consider it just as like important as housing. But
Yes.
but, I mean, it's not that way, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
and you're
that's
right.
and how is it gonna be viewed that way? Because, like, this was a thought I was having earlier today, is, like, what are necessities for me? Well, if I and this is I'm gonna expand upon this going back to college, but what are my necessities? Well, if I don't pay my rent, someone's gonna come and literally force me out of this apartment, and that's legal for them to do that,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm wrong for occupying this space without paying rent. I'm not worthy of a literal space, so I need to be kicked out of this. So they do that. They kick you out of that place. Like, and then what if like, so that's necessity number 1. Rent check, right? That is the number 1 most important thing in our society, I would say. That is the number 1 most important bill or like, expense that one can incur. The next one is probably like your car because again that's the next one they take. And they literally they take these things if you're not paying for them, which like checks out economically. But food, there's a loophole there because they're not gonna come like take food that I ate and they're not gonna like, you know what I'm saying, like
Yeah,
it's equally it's equally as important as those things, and I believe that everybody should have them.
but
But
it's not valuable.
and as a person who is struggling, that is where I saw a beautiful line to draw because I had to put all my money in my gas tank. I had loans covering my rent checks, so no one was going to kick me out. But any other money I needed in my gas tank and not uh, in my car. I'm sorry, and not for my food.
Mhm.
So like I drew the line there and I like essentially denied myself of an adequate diet for like 2 years in order to get the rest of this stuff paid. And that's not sensical at all for anybody to have to do that. Obviously, I know like a large portion of the population does. That's where my frustration is at with all of this.
Yeah.
And so and a lot of it is in these like these systems, right? A lot of it is in these things like I think the free and reduced lunch program is great. It is a great start. That type of system to me, and I know this is kind of a thing because this is getting into policy. So I hear you and bring on the like the questions in the comments. But I think that program is great because people who don't have the means to food need food. Um, and then I was talking about college, kind of pigeonholing. Doing a college does a wonderful job of like, well, and that one's another like paradox because it gives you. I think I was talking to you about the I was like, it would be nice for Joe Biden to pay off my loans, but
Yeah.
it would also be really nice if he gave all my friends who didn't go to college that same amount of money.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyways, so those systems, and then like if we are struggling, like where's the we have like WIC. You worked in WIC,
Yeah.
and there's like a defined like you get that set amount of money, and then there's like products that you are or aren't allowed to buy in the store,
So
correct?
the way the program worked when I was there in 2014 to 16 was that you had an EBT card, but it was not loaded with money like food stamps cards are. It was loaded with, like, you can get bread, milk, eggs, legumes, cheese, and a couple other things. I forget what they were. But if you tried to purchase anything else with that card, it wouldn't be approved. It was only those WIC approved items that would come off of it. So it wasn't money, it was food items that were loaded onto the card.
Yeah, which is fair enough, but I think we could also do a better job of like packaging food in a sense that's like, okay, if someone's in like a detrimental situation, like can we put together like there's like Heinz ketchup and like Green Giant corn, like where is the like Welch's low income like box
Yeah.
of everything that one may need or want, and even then that would be hugely problematic because it doesn't take into account all the stuff in it that you wouldn't want or that you wouldn't
Yeah,
like or that
I
you know what
know.
I'm saying, and literally all this would just be like a little more income fix all these problems, um but I'm just saying people, if you're out here and you have been in any of these situations and you are one of these people that messes up in quotations that literally just you just exist in this society, and then you're getting blamed for all the things that you did like they're your fault. I'm just saying they're not your fault, um at all, and I want you to know that, uh so that you don't hold yourself hostage,
Yeah,
and blame yourself and then develop not only unhealthy relationships with food, but then unhealthy relationships with money and unhealthy relationships with people and blah, blah, blah. It just goes. It's all one giant interconnected thing, is my point.
yeah, and I'm feeling emotional. It's hard to I'm in no way trying to make this about me, but it's hard to hear some of your, like, life pain and struggles, as your sister. Those things are hard to hear. Um,
I'd like to chime in on that real quick too. Is that was another thing we would do. Like in college, I was very stubborn, and I guess I've had this belief for a while, that in the word we use is entitlement. But I think I am as a person, but I felt entitled to someone else paying for my food. I never wanted to pay for it. So I just wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't go out to eat. I wouldn't eat on my own. And then like Danielle was one of the people who was gracious enough to pick me up at times and feed me and take me out to food and stuff, which was really cool because I wouldn't have done it ever. So that was really nice. But yes.
but I think, like, it makes sense almost in, like, a rebellious way to not want to pay for the thing that you didn't have adequate amounts of, and not because, like, no one I'm assuming this it's not blame, I'm assuming no one knew that you wanted double lunches, because I feel like you're not the kind of person that would've said anything.
No, well, no, but it's like who it's embarrassing to
I
ask.
know, I know. That's what I'm like, so, like, there are these underlying issues with access to food that may not even be understood, because when you're being given this thing and you know that the person providing for you doesn't have more resources to provide, and you feel like you should be, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but grateful for what you have and not trying to cause problems, like, of course you're not gonna say anything.
Yeah,
So
but you're gonna internalize it like a
exactly. And I think that's just like one tiny piece of the pie here of our internalization of like we think of everything as being an individual problem when actually the fact that, and I'm going to say a growing male because we know energy needs are different for various reasons, but like to give someone something, but it's not actually adequate to help them. Sure, we could say that's better than nothing, but it's not actually meeting baseline needs for a human being's um, condition. And then I think this is where my frustration really like compounds is that then we have this like elitist society of you need to be the thinnest, you need to be the prettiest, you need to make the most money, you need to be able to do this, that, and the other thing in order to meet the standards of our society. And we like to think that in the United States, we have everything under control and it's all fine and good, but the like baseline things aren't being met and then they're being blamed on the individual. And that's just really not like helpful or fair. And I agree with what Nick said of people feeling like personally responsible for their well-being suffering um, when, and I'm not even relating that to weight, but just when all these things are going on and like what are you actually supposed to do to um, at an individual level improve it. The odds are not in the favor of everyone just being able to suddenly rise above these things. That's mythological. That's the American dream, but it's not like an accurate plan.
well,
And we can't even add the factor of racism onto this experience, which is going to change it um, because of the white privilege that we hold. So
yeah, that times 1,000. I would also like to chime in with, like, the, sexism aspect, like, right now, thin is what they want you to be, but if that changes
yeah,
as sexual, like, views, do, then they're gonna encourage you to be a different way, and you will be able to see that that is the actual thing that is going on there, like,
yeah,
yeah, and no, and the race thing is a wonderful thing to say because, like, again, I still don't think this is even close. I not that I need to, like, compare my everything to everything, but I'm still saying that I know people that had it worse, and a lot of it was because of their non-whiteness.
yeah. And the ex the period of time that you undergo things like this, um, is gonna vary for people too, which I think there's a lot of stories about people experiencing poverty and kind of overcoming it, but what it's like we don't
It's
talk
this
about the fact that that's not always gonna be logistically possible for a lot of situations, and we just make it that again, that individual problem to overcome it. Um,
uh, and it's so it's beautiful because we like to if you went to a casino and they were like, "Here's a bet that you have a 0.001% chance of winning, would you like to put your life, on it?" You'd be like, "Probably not." Most people would likely say no, but then they get you all the time in these positions and in these, scenarios in which your desire is to be at, like, the top. You're doing something so you can be at the top, and statistically, there's, like, a point however many 0 1 chance at doing it, and I it's so, like, obvious to me that they done gotcha. Just like the weight loss, it's the exact same thing where it's like, you've got to be thin, and here's a diet for you, and 97% of diets fail, but that should make you feel better about being one of the 3%
Right.
instead of, like, who's gonna weep for the 97? Like,
Yeah.
ugh.
Yeah.
I see that as the exact same thing where it's like you hold something over someone's head and it's incomprehensibly impossible, and rather than the majority of the people getting together and being like, because it's not their fault, rather than the majority of the people getting together and being like, "Oh, let's stop this diet nonsense." And this is, again, that's only directed to people who have the access and the choose to diet. Uh, Rather than doing that, they're like, "Yeah, let's diet harder and let me
Yeah.
be harder on myself." And the same with like a job where you're like, waiting a table in LA to like wait on fame is like a common like comparison.
Yeah. So basically, our goal of this whole conversation is to help people feel less alone with the othering and the oppression that happens from diet culture in our society at large and the healthism, um, because it's not well known how these social determinants of health are impactful. I think most people could say, like, yeah, if you're stressed and you don't sleep enough, that's of course going to impact your health. And oftentimes we actually use that as a scapegoat for why people aren't able to lose weight. And again, your weight does not define your health. That's not the point, but that's what our culture says, and really reinforces. And when you have all these other factors going on, you're not gonna be able to just sleep more at night and not stress, like, that's not an actual solution to things, and so I don't have the answers for, like, how we make all of this better, as a society and, globally, but I do know that following diet culture and its rules at whatever level you're in, whether you're the person who's giving advice for people to follow these things or you're the one seeking it because you think that you've done the wrong things and you need something to change, just to hear that that's not the end all be all is just a really easy target for people to make money off of. And honestly, like, I'm always gonna come back to how distracting it is when we're focusing on being as thin as possible for our health. That takes away from a lot of other things going on, and depending on the level of restriction, whether because you don't have access to food, as we've talked about, or because you're restricting it for the purpose of weight loss, um, your brain is not going to function at the level that it is meant to, which is another factor of it's not the same as distraction, but we know that you're really gonna focus in on those things, that's certainly coming from 2 very different perspectives, but ties into this whole conversation of we're not well when either of those things are happening, but yet that's what we're being told to do for our well-being.
Completely agree.
Um, so in addition to me saying I don't know how we solve this, I just wanna put a plug in as a dietitian that I was thinking about this on the ride home from work today, how I was employed as a person that for years that people came to when they felt like they'd just run out of all other options for weight loss or for understanding what they needed to do for health, and honestly just how like inaccessible that even is because at my job we took insurance, but a lot of people don't have insurance, and the cost of a dietitian out of pocket is expensive. And sure, I believe in my worth as a professional, but again, to feel like you have to resort to seeing a dietitian because you've been failed by all of these other just sources of misinformation and hoopla, to be honest, that isn't even accessible to all people. And so it's like, damn, like it's really a hamster wheel here. Um, Especially when you seek out advice from someone who doesn't understand health at every size or doesn't understand the systemic injustices that are happening and the social determinants of health. Um, and then you just get more harm perpetuated on you when you sought out the professional. So, um, you don't have to spend a fortune on groceries or shop at the most elite grocery store in order to um, provide adequate nutrition to yourself. You don't have to buy the fancy supplements and powders in order to be well. And when I say that, like, I'm just talking arbitrarily because, you know, coming back to the story I told of being a one of 3 members of a household that had $20 to I'm not saying, like, with no resources, you can have access to adequate nutrition. That's not the point of that, but saying when you do have enough money to buy adequate food for yourself, it doesn't have to be what our society is making it out to be. And I thought that for so long and practiced that for a while as a dietitian, and it's a lot more freeing to kind of back down from some of those things. Um, so just a seed to plant for anyone that feels really stuck with that, because I'm not here to tell you how to spend your money or that you have to donate it to people that don't have. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money, but just as one of the less popular voices in the dietetics field, that it doesn't have to be what we're being told, because we're being told these things in order for someone to make a profit and to keep us stuck in this loop of diet culture, which is why I hate diet culture.
Yeah, astute. And the people who are telling you this that aren't profiting off of you, which I could see as a retort to Danielle's
Mm.
statement is
Mhm.
like, oh, like, this person is helping me diet but isn't profiting. Like, it's still like there's still a cog in the wheel. They have
Yeah.
internalized
Yeah.
the diet culture and they are spewing it,
Because
which
they're
is
trying to help, right? But that's the thing, is that, like, that is my overall thesis of this podcast and my life work, is that it's not necessary.
it's really wonderful if you can implement diet culture as a controlling like force, but have you really implemented diet culture if you haven't implemented it to a point where your constituents are uh, they believe in it and they are implementing it, not only to themselves but around them. And so, like, please view it that way. Please juggle with it in that sense, to where it's like, oh, I is this information that I agree with at all as I spew it, um, to others and as I hold it over my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This is a pretty deeply personal episode and something that myself and Nick are very, very passionate about. Um, we would love any comments, questions, concerns that you have, any stories you'd like to share. Hit us up on Instagram. My Instagram page is the best way to reach us and to keep up with what's going on with this podcast, at Dietitian Dani Cast. If you prefer to watch the episodes rather than just listen to them, you can find them on YouTube, Diet Culture with Dani Cast, Delano. And we always appreciate spreading the word of the content on this podcast, and ratings and reviews. So thank you again, and talk to you next week.
Thanks, everybody. And I just want to quickly hammer home that point of engaging with us, because we are two minute viewpoints, and like we definitely want to like plug the viewpoints of the viewers and get like not only for the podcast's sake but for our own, because we clearly like haven't hit every angle of these stories. So please help us hit every angle of those stories. And I guess that's it. So yeah, thanks for triggering me, Danielle, and we can
Anytime.
talk about this soon again. See you guys.